Hello everybody. So in my never-ending quest to find somewhere quiet to shoot videos without people constantly interrupting me, I've ended up in Costa Rica, sweating my... I can't use that metaphor. Anyway, we're going to look at the funeral, 163. This is a sitcom script from an Australian sitcom called Mother and Son. I don't know if I'd classify it as funny. Australians tend to be a little bit weird when it comes to this kind of stuff. They tend to be a little bit more experimental. It's a very small market. They're slightly different people. They didn't used to be politically correct. That's gone to hell in a handbasket now as communism takes hold. But yeah, slowly, isn't it funny? The erosion of freedom comes just around the time people lose their creativity and sense of humor. Yeah, so I wouldn't classify this as particularly good from Australia. There was one about a dog. They did this sitcom about a dog and it was brilliant. It was, I can't remember what it was called off the top of my head, but it had this comedian dressed as a dog and his owner just saw him as a regular dog and all the other regular dogs were just men in fursuits. And it was really clever, really well observed, smart, different. I've seen a couple of Australian movies too. Very hit and miss. Sometimes you think, yeah, that's fantastic, but sometimes just unwatchable crap, much like Hollywood. But I guess because it's a smaller market, they tend to be more experimental. They tend to try new things, new ideas, which, yeah, it's just fantastic if they can do it. I remember when the big three game consoles came out years ago. We had the PlayStation, the Xbox, and the Nintendo GameCube, and everyone was laughing at the GameCube because it had like half the power of the PlayStation. Everyone thought it was just garbage. Then it turned out that Nintendo knew exactly what they were doing, that the cheaper architecture meant that the game developers could take experiments, they could try new things. So the games on it turned out to be much better, more imaginative, more inventive, and cheaper to buy. So the audience really bought into it. So the Nintendo GameCube might have lost out in terms of technology, but in terms of audience satisfaction, it more than won the race. And that's what we see. Now in Australia, that used to be true. A small market, they could do whatever they want. This doesn't hold up very well. It's marketed, I guess, I've only seen this episode. It's marketed very much at an older crowd, a very conservative audience who, I don't know, they're not the sort of people who are going to want to take comedic risks. So the show comes across as very safe, very formula, very forced. It's all about a mother losing her mind as she gets older. She's got Alzheimer's, presumably, or something. Memory's starting to go. So she's living with her son, who's kind of a loser, middle-aged guy. God, it's hot in here. Another son is kind of greedy, and that's their personalities clashing is where we get the humor from. She acts kind of crazy, so we get a little bit of humor from that, from her stupidity, I guess, as she's losing her mind. But it's cheap laughs. It's not funny. It came out roughly the same sort of era as Mind Your Language, but it is not the comedy classic that Mind Your Language was. It's not the best. Sitcom stands for situation comedy, in case you didn't know, some people don't. Scripts for this type of performance are written so the audience will see the funny side of situations. So just in case you didn't know what a comedy was, a comedy is where we see the funny side of situations. Well, not much comedy in the last couple of years. I guess that will come when it's time for you to graduate. This show deals with the problems and funny situations that a grown-up son living with his elderly mother faces. This is from The Funeral. We might watch the episode because, frankly, it's getting almost impossible to upload videos to YouTube now with bad internet and all the other problems we've got and the lack of anything in the book. So who knows what we'll do? Might do a project, might just dump a monthly test on you, who knows. The story so far, well, I'm not going to bother with that. So the funeral script. Now this is very hard for me to read because obviously it's meant to be a performance. It is not going to be a performance because it's just me. So Maggie, I say Arthur, obviously that's Mum. Yes, Mum, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Your uncle is dead. No, they've been to a funeral. There's no context here. They've been to a funeral to bury their uncle. The other uncle has come into the room having a chat with Mum, and so she comes in and says, "Your uncle is dead." And Arthur goes, "Oh, at last it sinks in. We'll have to do something about a funeral." I said, "No, we did it, Mum. We did it this morning." And she goes, "No, no, no." So she knows better, but no one believes her because she's crazy. Yes, yes. Now you go back in there and talk to Uncle Tom. No, Uncle Tom isn't talking to me anymore. Or maybe that's because you've been boring him to death with those photos. Boring him to death. You can see the rich vein of comedy brilliance here. You don't think it's my fault. You brought out the photos. Now go on, back you go. They're really condescending. The actors doing this are shockingly awful. No, I was doing something. I've got to get some string. So she crosses to the bedroom, confused but trying hard. So they kind of ignore her and then turn to each other. String? Oh, how do I know? That doesn't. Some of these lines. I mean, maybe they make perfect sense in Australia. How do I know? How would I know? Would be how we'd say. Well, how would I know? How would I know what's going through her mind? And then Liz, Robert's wife. Can we go home now? You can't leave, you're supposed to be giving Uncle Tom a lift. Maggie enters from the bedroom holding a length of string, so she crosses towards the living room. What's the string for, Mum? I'm going to tie his toes together. Whose toes? That's what you do when someone dies, you tie their toes together. You do not do that in England. I don't know if you do it here, I wouldn't imagine so. It's a bit weird, to be honest. You're too late, Mum. Uncle Andrew is buried. Yes, yes, I know that. I'm talking about the other one, in there. Uncle Tom? I'm sure he doesn't want his toes, and he looks tied. Takes it all in. What happened to him? He's dead. Uncle Tom? So the other one gets up. He can't be. He's not moving. I mean, there's so many more ways you could write this funny. He can't be. Can he not? The living room. No, he's dead. People don't just die like that. That's exactly how they die. What do they do, Liz? Make an announcement? Arf. I just want to roll around laughing at that one. We've just been to a funeral. Do you think he should have died there and saved us a second trip? So Liz is getting upset. People don't just come home from a funeral and keel over in someone else's living room. Maybe Uncle Tom doesn't know that. Again, hilarious. Well, he should. Yeah, he should know. He should know. Here, quieting him down. I'll tie his toes together. Yeah, that's what dead people need. Tied toes. I never heard that tradition before. In England years ago, they used to put coins on top of your eyes so that you could pay the ferryman to take you to heaven. Otherwise, you ended up in hell or some nonsense. No, you won't. I think we should be going, shouldn't we, Liz? You see, Robert he's not a nice guy. You can't go. Well, you're not driving him home, not now. Ha ha! Puts a pillow under Uncle Tom's head. What are you doing, Mum? I'm trying to make him more comfortable. I don't think he minds. It's another really strange line. I don't think he cares about being comfortable, but I don't think he minds. Just doesn't work. We can't just leave him like this. Maggie pulls his legs around. Oh, he's a bit of a dead weight. Again, the use of the word dead. Puns. Terrible writing. Absolutely awful writing. Some coins drop out of Uncle Tom's pocket. Robert, the unpleasant brother. What was that? Just some money falling out of his pocket. And his wife says, don't you touch it. I wasn't going to, but if there's anything valuable in there, someone should go through his pockets. And then the other brother goes, I'm calling the police. I haven't touched him. To find out what to do, I don't know. Do you ring the police? Do you ring the ambulance? You ring the doctor. Thank you, Liz. The doctor. How come you're the only one who's sane? So he looks up the number. I try to stay civilized and reasonable. I don't get carried away with silly hysterics. She's about to get hysterical. You can tell because the writing is so bad. Arthur dials. Of course, you'll have to burn the couch, she says. Burn it? I'll never sit there again. Not now. God. Into the phone. Hello, this is Arthur Beer. Beer? How typically Australian. I'd like to speak to Dr. Oh, yes, I'll wait. To Maggie. Couldn't we cover him up? No. Yeah, sorry, yes, we don't want him to get cold. I'll get a sheet. Cold. Haha. Again, comedy. Arf. So she crosses into the kitchen. Arthur, interphone. Hello, this is... What? Oh, yeah, you could die waiting to talk to the doctor. Ha ha ha, another hilarious pun. I say, Arthur, I've just remembered something. Yes? I'm a trained nurse. Yes, Mum, but they taught me what to do about all this. What? I wish I could remember. See, it's just, again, they don't take us seriously, so it's funny, laughs are plenty. Into the phone. Hello, don't hang up. This is an emergency. Someone has just died here and I'd like to speak. Symptoms? And then Liz comes out with a sheet. What's wrong? She wants me to describe the symptoms. He's only got one symptom. He's dead. I'm not sure that's a symptom. It's more of a cause. Liz spreads the sheet. Oh, let me speak to them. Crazy Mum. No, Mum. Give it to me. Very definite. Gives her the phone. One mad person talking to another. Haha, mad. Into the phone. Hello. The symptoms are prone position, no respiratory function, no pulse, suspected cardiac arrest, and pupils dilated. Thank you. She hands the phone back to an astonished Arthur. I told you I was a trained nurse. You see, there's nothing wrong with Mum's memory. She's fine. Perfect. And in beaming with pride, she sits down on the dead uncle. Dreadful. Now with sitcoms, I have to say I don't really know about Australia. In England, a sitcom will usually run 6 to 12 episodes. So 6 episodes, what you normally find with a 6-episode run is the show will be higher quality because you've only got to write 6 episodes. So you'll get a short story arc, each episode will have a few laughs, it'll be fun, the characters will develop, there'll be some solid writing. With the 12-episode arcs, doesn't tend to be quite so good because obviously the writers have got to work a lot harder, there's longer time to develop, so they develop slower, and sometimes they don't develop at all. And usually there'll be a few what we call filler episodes. Fillers are just nonsense thrown in just to fill space. So 12 episodes usually worse. In America, a usual run of a sitcom or anything else will be 22 episodes, to maybe 26. So you can imagine the quality is on the decline straight away. Saw a documentary once about the making of Roseanne, which was a big 90s sitcom with a giant fat American woman who was racist. I think she was anti-Jewish or anti-something or other. I don't know what she was. I think she was Jewish actually and made some other racist remark and got sacked anyway. Over and over again, she was just awful. And I remember the writing studio, so they had all these writers around the table and they were just laughing and say, oh my God, does somebody know a joke? Please, does anyone know anything funny? Because they're just burned out on it. They've been writing this crap for years. And there's just only so much you can do with these characters. You know, especially Roseanne, for instance, was a family. It was just this family in a house, rarely ever left the building because obviously when you shoot outside of your set, you're putting up the price. I imagine that this one, again, would be shot very, very much inside the studio. Very rarely would they go out. And when they do go out, it would be short scenes, usually not on location because mics are very, very sensitive. So you've got to have very good mics, a very good studio setup outside is very difficult to control. So I would guess they usually shoot these things in studios. If you look at things like Mind Your Language, there was one with a bus where the bus breaks down and they're on this country lane and the country lane is just painted on the background because it's easier to control an environment indoors. I mean, I'm using this mic. This mic is pretty good, but it took me 2 or 3 days of experimenting to get the mic to work out where to put it so that I get the right sound. Even then, in a room like this, I get pretty bad echo. There's nothing you can do about that. But if I go outside, it's a polar mic, so it goes all the way around and I pick up everything. I get cars going by, motorbikes, I get wind noise, so it's very difficult to control the outside. You have to have a very good sound engineer, plus you have to have the lighting. So shows like this don't usually get shot off the studio, and normally you'll find the studio will be very, very simplistic. The set will be simple. In this one, the kitchen and living room is just one room, and they walk backwards and forwards between them so that the camera could easily follow. Just again to keep down costs. That makes no sense at all because Australia is a huge country, very lightly populated. So you tend to find people have bigger houses. So it's rare to have such a small, dingy little apartment with a whole family living in it. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's done to control the costs of the show. So you tend to see these sort of things. most people don't notice them. Most people don't notice where we take real life and compress it into a TV show. But the reasons for it are mostly budgetary. And I would guess that the writing is a victim of the show's low budget, where they're making this crap probably to fill space. This is probably a filler show, so the entire show, write it as fast as possible, get low-grade actors, because this is just a few people. You've got 4 people in this scene, plus dead Tom. They're just talking to each other. Normally a comedy show like this will do the work in the first series. So they'll do all the work, they'll get everything done, they'll establish the characters, they'll make you care about them, because then it really doesn't matter. They can do any old crap after that. And that's what really happens. They can destroy character arcs, they can introduce new characters, new actors, get rid of old ones. It doesn't really make much difference. So long as they keep the core of what makes the show popular with the audience, it doesn't have to be particularly popular, but so long as they keep the core working, they can do whatever they like. You see this with a show like The Simpsons, which is up to something like 30 odd episodes by now, and nothing's really changed. The core of the family, Homer and his wife, the 2 kids, the baby. His next door neighbor's wife died in an episode like 15 years ago, because she wanted a pay rise, so they sacked her, got rid of her. So, I mean, she only does a voice, but they sacked her. One of the other voices, actors, he died. So they just replaced him with someone, if they can't find someone that sounds like it, they just write the character out and create a new one. And really, because it's such a big show, nobody really cares. If you killed off the main character, you'd have a problem, because then you're changing the whole show dynamic. But a show like this is probably, they do the work in the first series, they get it working, and then they can change things about as they have to. Again, I remember in Star Trek, The Next Generation, when that came out, nobody was sure what to make of it, because it came out in the sort of mid-80s. Star Trek had been a huge hit in the 60s. Well, no, it hadn't. That's actually a lie. It didn't do very well in the 60s, but when it started getting into syndication, which is where the cable TV channels in America started screening it as reruns, then it became popular, and it became huge. The movies did really well. They brought back a TV show, Star Trek The Next Generation, so it jumped on 70 years into the future. And no one knew if it was going to be a success or not. It became huge. And one of the actors in the first series, I think it was only about a dozen or so episodes in, she demanded doubling the money. She was just a stupid woman who thought, I'm going to cash in on this. So she said to them, I want more money. So they sacked her. They wrote her out in the next episode. She died, and they made sure it was a ridiculous death. A villain, a monster just said, I'm going to kill her to make a point. And she just dropped dead. Done. And then all the characters said, oh my God, what a meaningless death. It was pointless. It meant nothing. Just to kind of remind the actress, you mean nothing to us. We replace you. And actually, it was a pretty seamless replacement. They killed her off, got rid of her. She was the head of security, so she was supposed to be super tough soldier, and it was just this frail little woman who looked like a model. So they got rid of her and they replaced her with Worf, who was this gigantic Klingon, big black guy playing him. So that actually made a lot of sense. He looked like he would actually do that job, where she just looked like she was there for the paycheck. So that's what they'll probably do with this. I imagine this is written as quick as possible, as cheaply as possible. It's made as cheaply as possible. What I would imagine they do is they shoot the scene. If the actors make a mistake, they'll probably let little mistakes go, and they'll probably shoot loads of scenes together. So I imagine that they'll be working all day for probably a week, and they'll probably get their whole season. They'll probably make it as fast as possible. The writers will just be churning out any old crap. That's why a couple of these lines don't make sense, because they probably got past people because they're writing so fast and they don't really care. It's rare that you see a comedy show, because people watch comedies, they'll watch any old crap you put out and call funny. So it's rare that you see one where a lot of effort has really gone into it. Off the top of my head, comedy shows that are really good, it's very hard to think of one. One I like, and you won't, is it's called Afterlife. It's a Ricky Gervais. I don't like Ricky Gervais as a stand-up comedian. I hate him, but I do think he's a fantastic writer, and he works really well as an actor. And Afterlife is just, it's a nice low-end, low-budget British sitcom. That's probably why I like it so much. It's British. and his wife has died. In the first series, he's just suicidal. He wants to die, and it's just funny. He's just a miserable. He attacks people. It's just really funny. It is really funny. You know, he gets attacked, and he just ends up stealing this hammer off of the attacker, and then some kids attack him, so he just attacks them with the hammer, and he's just an old guy, and it just looks really funny. So I really like that show. But again, they do a 6-episode run, and Ricky Gervais is a good writer, and I know that he was putting a lot of himself into the show. You can see it. That's a good quality show because it's funny and it's consistently good. He also wrote The Office and a load of other stuff that is, again, consistently good. But mostly sitcoms are usually bad. Another victim of this has always been horror. Horror movies are very, very formulaic. You normally end up with a couple of very likable or attractive. If you're going to appeal to a younger audience, they have to be attractive. Likable characters who go through horrendous odds, are beaten up, murdered, and we end up getting down to the last one who didn't realize they were a hero but finds it in themselves to fight the monster. It's the same old crap over and over again. Horrors tend to follow the same failings as situation comedies. Rom-coms are even worse because they're so easy to write, so they tend to be very unimaginative. But anything can be like this. Anything can be awful. You know, science fiction's getting that way. Star Wars has become like this. The Mandalorian, sorry, not The Mandalorian, that's finished. The Book of Boba Fett has just wrapped, and everybody's saying it's rubbish, it's just content. Because Disney Plus have launched, they want to fill up with popular content, so basically they've thrown a load of money. Quick, make us something fast. So they quickly chose, who's our most popular character? Boba Fett, let's give him a show. And they have the actor that played Boba Fett and Jango Fett in the movies is now old. He never really made it big in Hollywood. He's cheap. They threw him into it. He's really fat and old now and bald. Who likes bald guys? Threw him in it. It's just cheap TV. And everyone's now sort of realizing this is just cheap crap. Star Wars used to be an event. I remember when it came out as a kid, it was an event. You know, people were excited. People queued up. I remember people in costumes. It was an event. Star Wars was huge news. There was TV spots a year leading up to it. People were talking about it. It was in the news. Now it's just garbage. And that's the world we live in. And this, I would imagine, is a victim of it. But I could be totally wrong because I'm not Australian. I have no idea of their culture. But to me, this feels very, very cheap. So let's have a look at the questions. I want you to do the questions 1 through 9, and then we'll go through the answers. So, answers. Where were Maggie, Arthur, and the others that morning? Well, the episode's called The Funeral, so there's a huge clue there. So I'm going to go ahead and say The Funeral. If you didn't get that, you should probably give up and go home, except you're already home because none of you ever leave it anymore. Why does Maggie want to find a piece of string to tie his toes together? I have absolutely no idea why somebody would want to tie someone's toes together. Doesn't make any sense to me. According to Liz, whom should you ring if someone dies? She says the doctor. Could be true. I think in England it's I was actually talking to James about this. It's 999. You press 999 and they say, which service do you require? Police, fire, or ambulance? And you'd normally say, ambulance, I have a suspected dead body. And they send somebody around to collect it. Simple as that. What job did Maggie do when she was younger? That's mum. She was a trained nurse. Presumably she was in the drugs. Why does Arthur say one mad person talking to another? Because he's extremely poorly written. The person on the other end of the phone is trying to establish, are they dead? Now, I used to go out with a girl. I was actually engaged to her. That didn't work out because she was insane. Turkish girl, very hairy. She was an ambulance worker. She would work on the switchboard. So people would phone up. She sometimes did the late shift, and people would phone up. And there was a whole thing that you had to go through. People would phone up and say, oh, my mum's dead. And you say, okay, I need to ask you some questions. And you'd have to go through the questions. In the meantime, she would send an ambulance. So the ambulance would go, as an emergency, straight to the house, tracking the number straight away, because she might not be dead. Simple as that. They might be able to save her life. She might be having a stroke or a heart attack. She might be in other problems, but they don't know. So she keeps the girl talking. She asks questions to try and establish whether she's dead. If they come through, she's bright purple. I found her lying on the floor with her tongue hanging out in a pool of blood. They cancel the ambulance and send something else instead. But valuable seconds. They try and save every second by getting an ambulance straight to that person, and then they ask questions to see if it can be cancelled so the ambulance can go off on another call. So there are questions to be answered in case you're not dead. So, I mean, this is a sitcom. They probably didn't do that kind of research, but he says one mad person, because he's asking, what's the symptoms of death? It's actually a perfectly reasonable question. You know, I've got someone here who's dead. What's the symptoms? Well, he's laying face down and it doesn't seem to be moving. Well, okay, so he may not be dead. Can you check for a pulse? Can you put a mirror under his mouth to see if he's breathing? There are things that we can do to establish what is the correct response. And of course, his mum, he calls her crazy. Do you think the subject matter of death, old age and funerals is suitable for comedy? Absolutely yes. In my opinion, anything is suitable for comedy. If you have a problem with it, if you're offended by it, it's absolutely your problem and it's absolutely your right to not watch it. But it is not anyone's right to tell me what I can or can't watch. Censorship is wrong, and there's no exception to that. Censorship is wrong. If you don't want to watch something, turn it off. Don't tell other people what they can do. Simple as that. Would you describe Liz as a warm, caring person? No, because we keep getting things like, I'm going to leave. Oh, I found a dead body. That's your problem now. I'm out of here. From what very little I know, she does seem to be with the right husband. I would say there's a gap in attractiveness. When you see the actors, he's short, fat, and bald, and she's a bit more attractive. I don't really see them as a couple, but it is what it is. It's so hot in here. Some of the humour is derived from a play on words or pun. Explain why the following comments are funny. They're not funny, but it does say in the context of this script. Maybe that's because you've been boring him to death with those photos. You could die waiting to talk to the doctor. Because he's dead already, you're boring him to death. Well, you've already bored him to death. He died. You could die waiting to talk to the doctor. Yeah, I mean, they're not really funny. They're puns. They say that sarcasm is the lowest form of wit, except the pun, and probably below that it would be American humour. Do you think this script would be much funnier to watch than it is to read? Why do you think so? Well, I've suffered through watching it as well. I don't think it's any much funnier. I don't think it was much fun to read. I certainly didn't enjoy it. You might have done because it's the first time you've had to go through it. I doubt it, to be honest. I doubt any of you are listening, to be fair. I'll probably stick it on tomorrow because none of you are going to listen to me anyway, so I'll just stick on a 30-minute sitcom and I'll ask you some questions that you won't answer. So I think we'll probably do that tomorrow. So there are the questions, there are the answers. That's today, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.